on, everybody, and welcome back to Holy Grail Sports Cards. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the 2019-2020 draft class, picks number 1 through 15. So we're going to be taking a look at the top half of the draft class, and we're going to be sort of using simple math and some ratios to get a better sense of who are some of the better value plays out there and who are some players that the data is showing are sort of overpriced. So for this portion of the video, we're going to be looking at my computer. I made a spreadsheet of everything so that you guys can see everything clearly, and I'm just going to be walking you through some of my thought process on why I decided to analyze the data this way and what some of the ratios mean. So let's get right into it, flip the camera around, and go on the computer.
All right, everybody, and we are back. So I just wanted to first break down, what each column is, what it represents, and so we'll start with. So I did from picks number 1 to 16, all the way from Zion to Chuma Okeke, and the first column is just the total number of PSA 10s that they have graded so far, and then the total number of PSA 9s. The next column is the percentage of the population of PSA 10s. So basically, in the entire population, what PSA 10s represent. So Zion has a 40% percentage of the population that are 10s, so it's a 40% chance of getting a 10. Ja has a 38% chance of getting a 10 from the cards graded so far, and so on and so on. Next column is the total graded, so that's silver and base combined. And I just wanted to get a sense of the overall, volume out there that had been graded for all these prospects. The next, I broke it down into graded silvers and graded base. In the last column is a sort of a number that I came up with myself. I'm sort of calling it the base to silver multiplier. And basically what this was is just taking the base and dividing it by the silver to reach a number which represents the demand for that player. And my reasoning behind that is because people only choose to grade base for very, very elite top prospects that they believe there's going to be constant demand for on a daily basis. So we see that with prospects like Zion, Luka, Trae Young, Mike Trout, Jason Tatum, these types of players that are stars already, and people are sort of using these base cards as a way to bet on their performance on a short-term basis, potentially long-term as well, but mainly for as an investment vehicle for a short-term speculation. So that the more base that the player has, the more perceived demand the market views, that it needs to be filled. So, you wouldn't be grading a lot of base with a player like Ty Jerome or Cam Johnson. These are players that, players might collect, and they might, want some of their cards, but they're not going to be out there, buying up 5 to 10 Prism base or anything like that. So the higher this base to silver multiplier, the more demand for that player there is currently. So now that we have that out of the way, I just want to show that Zion and Ja are obviously the two most highly graded cards out there. They're Prism silvers and base. Zion almost has 9,200 graded silvers and base combined. Ja has over 5,600. So after that, there's a big drop-off. RJ Barrett's next, then Rui Hachimura, Tyler Hero, Kobe White, and then there's a bigger drop-off from that cluster as well. So we're going to get into a couple of these data points. And the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to go to this next tab, which is the percentage of PSA 10s sorted by lowest to highest. So I just wanted to get a sense of what the toughest grades on certain players' cards were. So at the very bottom, we have Rui Hachimura, which only 29% of his silvers submitted have gotten PSA 10s. That's a super, super low percentage, and typically you don't even really see that low of a percentage for modern day cards. So, and then the next up we have Cam Reddish, 36%, Ja 38%, Zion 40%. all the way to Chuma Okeke, who has the highest out of these top prospects at 67%. So once again, we see sort of clusters, right? Ja and Zion are sort of together, they have a similar percentage of their cards submitted are getting PSA 10s. And then, some of the lower tier prospects like Chuma Okeke, Sekou, DeAndre Hunter, they're sort of having, high 50 to high 60s percentage of PSA 10s. So the next thing I want to go over is just the players with the most demand. So like I said, Zion and Ja are 1 and 2. They're way up there. They have a very, very high demand multiplier. But then after that, I actually think it gets pretty interesting. RJ Barrett is number 3, which I think we could all sort of predict that. But after that, the 4th most in-demand player, according to the data, is Tyler Hero. And after that, Roy Hachimura, Cam Reddish, and then Kobe White. So notice how we don't see Darius Garland in here. We don't see Jarrett Culver. We don't see a number of the top 10 picks. We see, Tyler Hero, the 13th pick. We see Roy Hachimura, the 9th pick. We see Cam Reddish, who is the 10th overall pick, I believe. And then Kobe White, the 7th overall pick. So those are just the most in-demand players. So I sort of want to go back to this column. I want to sort of talk about what I'm seeing with this data. So I'm seeing that the main thing is that if a player has a very, very low percentage of PSA 10 silvers to the overall population, if they turn into an elite prospect, those cards are going to command a premium. So if Roy Hachimura becomes the player that people, think he's capable of becoming, people have said, oh, he's going to be like a poor man's Kawhi, right? Cam Reddish right here at 36% of PSA 10s to his whole population of silvers. If he becomes like a Paul George, his PSA 10s are going to be highly coveted, right? Same goes for Ja and Zion, where if you submit 10 silvers, you'd be lucky to get 4 out of 10 as PSA 10s. And Roy Hachimura, if you submit 10, you'd be lucky if you got 3 come back as PSA 10s. So I think it's interesting to note, that, and it could make sense why people are paying such a premium for Ja and Zion, despite their already super high demand. But, it's just something to be aware of that certain cards are very, very hard grades and certain cards are much easier grades. So now we're going to talk about what I believe to be some of the best values out there. So the next thing that I did, there's one new column in this last tab, and that's the best value. So that formula that I came up with, it's really simple. It's just the price of the PSA 10. So I made a column for the price of their most latest PSA 10s. And we're dividing the price divided by the demand multiplier. So basically, you can interpret that as we're sort of trying to get a sense of how expensive they are relative to their demand. So the higher the value that comes out from this formula, the more premium that is attached to them. So the more expensive of a card or a player that they are. You can interpret it as that. And then, on the contrary, the lower the number, the more of a value you can sort of see, or the more of a discount that those cards are getting compared to their demand. So I did the whole column of price of their latest PSA 10s. We can see that Zion's are way up there, almost a $3,000 PSA 10. But there's more and more that are coming to the market, and I expect that to definitely affect the price, make it come down a little bit if he's not going to be making a deep playoff run. And then we see Ja's cards are also over $1,200. So RJ Barrett's latest PSA 10s around the $400 mark. Roy Hachimura, $275. Tyler Hero, $250. Kobe White, 350. Cam Reddish, 225. Sekou Demboya, 150. DeAndre Hunter, 100. Jarrett Culver, 125. Darius Garland, $80. PJ Washington Jr., $100. Jackson Hayes, $75. Romeo Langford, $100. Cam Johnson, $65. Chumo Kiki, $140. So, these numbers are sort of the latest numbers within the past couple of days. If there was sort of like a wide range, I sort of took the middle number. The market's been going crazy lately, and sometimes there's not a recent card sold within a couple of days, so you're sort of going off of last week or something. So take these numbers with a grain of salt. They're not perfectly accurate according to the time that you're watching this, so just be aware of that. But so anyway, we're going to get into that final value. So we can see that Ja and Zion are very, very high values, very, very high prices compared to their demand. So the higher the number, like I said, the pretty much, in my opinion, the more overpriced that they are. But with top prospects, you see that all the time. That's just how it is. But at this point in time, what the data is telling me is that Zion and Ja are, you're paying the most premium you can possibly pay, and it's possible that a lot of stuff is being priced in. A lot of stuff is being priced in. So, and I want to sort of analyze some of the players that I believe to be really good values. We see Tyler Hero here, with his $250 PSA 10 divided by his 2.07 demand multiplier. That gives us a value of 120.98, which, if you compare that value to some of other players, he's being valued about the same as PJ Washington Jr. He's being valued about the same as DeAndre Hunter, right around there, and Darius Garland. So that 250 price, to me, I still think it's going to come way down because there's just not a lot of PSA graded cards out there for him to where I expect them to be in a couple months. But what it's telling me right now is that, no matter what happens to his price, as his price comes down, his multiplier just gets cheaper and cheaper. So that 120, if you think he's a better prospect than Darius Garland or than DeAndre Hunter, that makes him a better buy in the current market circumstances, the current market environment, than some of these other players. Like I said, I'm not making any claims on the future value. All I'm saying is that right now in the current market, if the market were to go up and only go up, Tyler Hero would be a good buy at this particular point in time. The next player that I think represents a pretty darn good value is Cam Reddish, and he has one of the highest demand multipliers. I think he was number 4 or 5. Number 5, yeah, he was number 5 on the highest demand multiplier, but he has he's definitely not 5 in terms of the best value. So let's see exactly how high his is. So his is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So he's got the 5th highest demand, but his value multiplier is actually the 10th lowest, the 10th highest. So to me, Cam Reddish right now at $225 with a very high demand. That 172, that's putting him in the same prospect range as RJ Barrett, same prospect range as Jackson Hayes and Jarrett Culver. I believe Cam Reddish has the bigger upside, and with a very, very low percentage of PSA 10s, 36%, I think, that's his premium right now makes sense. He's a small forward. He's sort of comparable to Paul George, and with similar skill sets and similar upsides. So, the hobby loves these sort of combo forwards, these 3-and-D, but also really good two-way players. Cam Reddish, himself said that he strives to be one of the best two-way players in the league, and you definitely see him competing on both ends of the court. He was touted coming into the draft as one of the best shooters, some of the best fundamentals, and some of the best overall upside of any prospect. At one point in time, before he went to Duke, he was rated above Zion Williamson in terms of a prospect. So I'm pretty high on Cam Reddish. I definitely see a lot of the things that people are comparing him to Paul George. He's just really solidly built, super strong, and this later couple months of the season, January and February, he's been playing really, really well. In February, he averaged 16 points, and he seemed to be shooting above 40%, high 30s in threes. So he's definitely finding his shooting stroke again, and he's getting more confidence. So at this particular point in time, I think Cam Reddish represents a good value compared to the rest of these prospects. And once again, this is just assuming that the market is going to continue to go up, and these players are going to continue to perform as they have been. So he represents a good value as well. The other prospect that I think represents a really good value is P.J. Washington Jr. Despite having a higher percentage of PSA 10s to the overall population, his card was a much easier grade. We see pretty decent demand for him. It's under 1, so he has less demand than DeAndre Hunter and even Kobe White as well. So I'm surprised that he has less demand than DeAndre Hunter, honestly. But I guess power forwards, don't get the same type of love that shooting guards and small forwards get in the hobby. So, but at $100 for his PSA 10s, his value, he has a very, very low value multiplier, which is showing that he's a good value. And I think he represents a very solid buy at $100. A ton of upside for him as well. And I think those are my top 3 picks from what the data is showing. Next up, we're going to go into some of the players that I believe to be as sort of overbought if you are comparing it to terms in the stock market. A lot of stuff is already priced in, mainly on Romeo Langford, $100 PSA 10. I don't even think he's really done anything this season. And a very, very high value multiplier that puts him as the 5th or 6th most expensive player in the entire picks 1 through 16. So the next one is Sekou Demboya, $150 PSA 10, and compared to his demand, it's a very, very high price right now for Sekou. The next one is Ja and Zion. We saw that before, that even though they have a ton of demand, they also have a sky-high price. I'm big on both Ja and Zion, but I think so much is already being priced in. I do expect their prices to come down during the offseason when their teams are out of the playoffs, and more and more graded cards get into the population. And then I think the number one most expensive player that I see is Chuma Okeke. A couple months ago, was thinking he's definitely a sleeper. His prices were just a couple bucks for silvers. I think at one time they were $8 to $10 for a silver. It was like a no-risk gamble. His PSA 10s are selling for about $140. And, he has hardly any graded base out there, which is telling me that not a lot of people are really going for the demand game on him. People are not really expecting there to be a ton of demand, but still enough demand for the silvers to grade them and to, get them to market. So Chuma's got a sky-high premium on him right now. And we also see that same thing with Kobe White, that $350 PSA 10. Not a ton of graded base yet, and once again, all this could change. It's totally possible that there's a huge order coming in and there's hundreds of cards that will be graded, which will change around the demand multiplier. But from what I'm seeing right now, Chuma, Kobe White, Sekou, Romeo Langford, these guys are very, very overpriced for their current demand. So anyway, guys, like I said, my top 3 buys right now, based on what the numbers are telling me and what demand already exists for them, PJ Washington, Tyler Hero, and Cam Reddish. I think if I had to pick one, I would be saying Cam Reddish because he's got the lowest population of PSA 10s to his overall graded, and I think he's got the most upside as a player, and he's beginning to really come into his own later in the latter half of his rookie season. So these are just my opinions. I encourage you to do your own research and to check out. Try to create some of your own demand multipliers and come up with some of your own math equations and see if the numbers are leading to a certain thesis for you guys. So if you like this video, I'd appreciate you giving a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. We're going to be putting out lots of content like this. We're going to be putting out lots of analysis and talking about the market, latest trends, and sort of the future of the hobby. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.